When I arrived for my wife's birthday dinner, no one was there. The hostess said, "Oh, you're the ex-husband?" I blinked. Ex. Then she handed me divorce papers signed a week ago, filed while I was planning this surprise. A man at the bar said, "She's with me now, buddy." I picked up the wine and left without a word. My name is Russell Hagen. I'm 46 years old, and I've lived in St. Paul, Minnesota, nearly my whole life. I work in insurance, claims adjustments, mostly. It's not thrilling. I'm not going to pretend it's a calling. But I've been good at it for 20 years, and it pays the bills. It used to pay for Denise and me. Our mortgage, our modest vacations, our dinners out, and the antique locket I'd tucked into my coat pocket that Friday night. We lived in Roseville, in a two-story colonial with blue shutters and a porch swing that squeaked when you sat on it. The kind of place you could imagine raising kids in. But we never had any. Life didn't go that way. We tried, and then we stopped trying. It was a quiet agreement. There were no long conversations, just silence that stretched further with time. We buried the topic like people bury family secrets, deep enough that we could pretend they weren't there. Denise worked in healthcare administration at Regions Hospital. She was sharp, diligent, and always a little guarded. She liked routines. Breakfast was always coffee and yogurt. Saturday mornings were for laundry and phone calls to her mother in Duluth. She loved her job, but often said it wore her out. I think that was a clue I missed. I think I missed a lot, in hindsight. Her birthday was coming up. 42. I had planned a quiet dinner. Nothing over the top, just intimate. Lucci's Trattoria on Grand Avenue was our spot. We'd gone there every year since 2012. Same corner booth near the window. Same bottle of Barolo. It was the only tradition we kept up without fail. It felt safe. I held on to it like a man gripping the last rung of a ladder he wasn't sure he wanted to climb back down from. I remember the air was cold that evening, late March cold, when the snow's mostly melted but the wind still has teeth. I wore a charcoal gray wool coat, the one Denise had bought me 2 Christmases ago. I remember checking my phone 5 times in the parking lot. No messages. No calls. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing to prepare me for what was coming. I stepped into Lucci's right on time. The hostess was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair tied in a bun. She smiled out of obligation, eyes flitting between me and the seating chart. "Hi. Table for 2, she asked. "Yeah, should be under Hagen. Russell Hagen." She blinked at the screen. Her brow creased. Then she looked up, hesitant. "Oh, you're the ex-husband?" The world tilted. Just a little. Like the floor shifted by half an inch, enough to make your stomach lurch. "Ex?" I asked. One word. Flat. She reached behind the podium and pulled out a manila envelope, sealed and heavy. "She said you might show up," she murmured, handing it to me. I opened it. Divorce papers. Signed. Finalized. Dated a week ago. It was like flipping through someone else's life, seeing signatures and court stamps on pages you weren't supposed to be reading. My name was everywhere, alongside hers. A decade and a half together reduced to paragraphs and legalese. I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Behind me, I heard a voice. Casual. Almost amused. "She's with me now, buddy." I turned. A man sat at the bar, swirling a glass of scotch. Mid-40s, maybe. Beard that looked styled. Leather jacket that creaked when he moved. He raised his glass toward me like he'd just beat me in a card game. I looked at him for 2 full seconds. Then I walked past the hostess stand, past the table that was supposed to be ours. The wine was already on the table. Barolo, of course. I picked it up by the neck, cool and smooth in my palm, and left. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I walked. I walked up Grand Avenue past shuttered boutiques and cafes closing for the night. Past the bookstore where Denise and I used to browse travel guides. Past the ice cream parlor we'd stood in during a snowstorm once, laughing like idiots. I walked until the bottle grew warm in my hand and my fingers ached from the cold. Eventually, I found myself at the park off Lexington. There was no one there. Just a bench and the sound of leaves scraping across the pavement. I sat down and opened the bottle. No glass. Just the bottle. I drank until the cold didn't hurt anymore. I thought about Denise. About how quiet the house had been lately. How we'd stopped touching. Stopped asking how each other's day went. I chalked it up to routine. To the way all long relationships settle into something soft and unspoken. But maybe it was rot. And I just couldn't smell it. I thought about the man at the bar. How casual he was. How smug. I wondered how long it had been going on. Weeks? Months? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. I thought about the locket in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. Opened it. Inside, I'd placed a tiny picture of us from our trip to Charleston 5 years ago. Denise was laughing, mid-sentence. I had my arm around her. We looked alive. We looked real. I dropped it into the trash can next to the bench. The next morning, I checked into a Holiday Inn near Snelling. I called in sick to work. I told them I had the flu. Not entirely a lie. Denise didn't call. She didn't text. 3 days passed before I finally broke and messaged her. Just one line. "I got the papers." She replied 3 hours later. "I'm sorry. I couldn't do it in person. It wasn't working, Russ." I didn't know how to say it. I didn't answer. It was a slow unraveling after that. I took a leave of absence from work. Said it was stress-related. Which was true, I suppose. I didn't shave. Didn't eat much. Mostly just sat in the living room staring at the walls. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It smelled like her shampoo. Her perfume lingered in the closet. There was a half-empty box of her favorite tea in the kitchen that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Wyatt, my best friend since college, showed up one afternoon unannounced. He brought sandwiches and a six-pack. "You look like HLL," he said. I didn't argue. He sat with me for hours. We didn't talk about Denise. He just sat there while the game played on mute. Sometimes that's what you need, someone to occupy the silence with you. 2 weeks after that, Denise showed up to get her things. She rang the bell like a stranger. I opened the door. She looked smaller. Or maybe I was seeing her differently. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked through like she was walking through a museum of her old life. Quiet. Careful. She gathered a few things: clothes, books, toiletries. Then she turned to me. "I never wanted to hurt you." I nodded. Not an agreement, just acknowledgement. "I tried to be honest," she said, her voice tight. "But it was easier not to be." I said nothing. She hesitated, then looked me in the eyes. I didn't fall out of love overnight. It happened slowly, like watching colors fade from a painting. "I see," I said finally. She picked up her bags, walked to the door. At the threshold, she stopped. "I hope you find peace, Russ." Truly. And then she was gone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was absolute. The days that followed blended together in an odd gray smear. I remember the passing of time only by the changing position of sunlight through the living room blinds. Morning light meant coffee I didn't drink. Afternoon glare meant I'd forgotten to eat again. Evening shadows meant the ache would start, right in the chest, where you swear you can physically feel the absence of someone. It wasn't loud. It was dull. Consistent. Like water dripping in the next room. I didn't leave the house unless I had to. Groceries. Mail. That was it. I'd walk through Cub Foods like a ghost, scanning cereal boxes and rotisserie chickens, not really seeing anything. The cashier would say, "Have a nice day," and I'd give a tight smile. That was the extent of my human interaction. One night, maybe 3 weeks after she left, I pulled out the box of photo albums from the hall closet. We'd stopped printing photos years ago, but we used to be the type of couple that made scrapbooks for every vacation. There was one from New Orleans, 2015. We were drunk on beignet and jazz. I sat on the floor flipping through the pages, her handwriting in the margins. Russ laughed so hard at this guy's saxophone solo, he choked on a powdered sugar donut. I closed the book and stared at the ceiling for what felt like an hour. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe for something to make sense. That's when I found myself calling Camille. She was a friend of Wyatt's. I'd met her once, maybe 2 years back, during a barbecue in Egan. I remembered she had this raspy voice and asked uncomfortable questions that made people squirm, but not me. She was divorced. Twice. Once in her 20s, once in her late 30s. When she picked up the phone, I didn't expect her to remember me. But she did. "Russell," she said. The insurance guy with sad eyes. "What's up?" I told her the truth. That I didn't know why I called. That I was losing it. That everything I thought was solid in my life had melted and reformed into something I didn't recognize. I wasn't even sure I was calling to talk. I just wanted someone to know I existed. Camille didn't give advice. She just listened. That was the thing about her. She had this way of being still on the other end of the line, like she was building a space for your words to sit down in and be unafraid. After a while, she said, "You're grieving. That's all this is. Doesn't matter that she's not dead. The loss feels the same." We started talking regularly. Nothing romantic. Not yet. Just conversations. Sometimes deep, sometimes stupid. We'd talk about books, music, why gas stations in Minnesota all seemed to carry the same brand of ugly hot dogs. We laughed. It felt strange, almost disloyal to laugh. I told her about the man at the restaurant. "Calvin." She paused. "Sounds like she was already halfway out the door before you ever knew," she said. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I think she was gone long before he showed up. That night, after I hung up, I stood in the hallway staring at the empty spot where our wedding photo used to hang. I'd taken it down a week ago, but the outline was still there on the wall, clean and bright against the faded beige. I couldn't bring myself to put anything in its place. I left the hook there. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but it did. Spring came slowly that year. March bled into April with chilly rains and a sun that showed up when it felt like it. I started going on long walks in the morning. Sometimes I'd end up in places I hadn't visited in years. Como Park, the library downtown, even the St. Paul Cathedral. I'm not religious, but there's something about big empty churches that makes grief feel less lonely. One morning, I walked past the hospital where Denise worked. Without meaning to, I stopped and stared at the front entrance. People moved in and out. Doctors, nurses, techs, visitors. I wondered if she was in there right now. I wondered if she was laughing at something someone said. I wondered if she'd ever thought of calling me again. She didn't. But one day, I got a text from her. "Can we talk?" That was it. I stared at it for 15 minutes before I replied. Sure. She came by that evening. No warning. Just her car pulling into the driveway like nothing had changed. She walked up to the house slowly, like she was nervous it might bite. I opened the door and stepped aside. No hug. No small talk. We sat at the kitchen table. I offered her tea. She said no. Then she looked up and said, I made a mistake. I didn't respond. She took a breath. Calvin isn't who I thought he was. It was exciting at first. He listened. He made me feel seen again. But I don't think he's stable. He's drinking too much. He's angry. He quit his job. I kept my voice low. Are you okay? She nodded, slowly. I'm safe. I left him 2 days ago. I'm at my sister's. I waited. She didn't cry. Denise never cried easily. I'm not asking to come back, she said after a long pause. I needed to talk to someone who knew me. Who knew the version of me that wasn't afraid. I leaned back in my chair. My chest felt tight. You knew I was planning a dinner for you, I said. My voice was flat, almost calm. You knew, and you let me walk into that place and find out that way. She looked down. I didn't know how else to do it. You had a dozen chances. She nodded. I know. For a moment, we just sat there with the sound of the fridge humming between us. I'm not angry anymore, I said, and I meant it. But I don't know who you are now, and I don't think I want to figure it out again. She stood. I understand. And that was it. She left. No drama. No tears. Just a quiet door closing on what was left. Life didn't immediately get better after that. But something shifted. I started going back to work. My boss didn't ask questions. He just nodded and handed me my caseload. I appreciated that. Camille and I started meeting up in person. Coffee at Nina's on Selby. A walk through the farmer's market. One time she came over and helped me hang new pictures on the walls. Not of us. Just landscapes. I wasn't ready for people yet. I bought a dog. A golden retriever from a shelter in Maplewood. Big, lazy, affectionate. I named him Booker, after the jazz musician. Booker didn't care about my past. He cared about walks and peanut butter and curling up next to me on the couch. I still think about Denise sometimes. Not with anger. Just the sense of weight. Like a stone in your pocket you forgot you were carrying. You move, it shifts. That's all. The house feels more like mine now. Not completely, but enough. Some nights, I sit on the back porch with a beer in hand and Booker at my feet, and I stare up at the sky and try to remember that healing doesn't look like progress. It looks like stillness. It looks like not checking your phone, not staring at the door, not waiting for the past to ring the bell. It looks like staying. By the time summer rolled in, thick and humid, the rhythm of my life had started to steady. It wasn't normal yet, not the normal I once knew, but it had structure. Wake up, feed Booker, coffee on the porch, then into the office. I started driving to work again instead of working remote. Sitting in a cubicle surrounded by quiet keyboard clatter and the occasional ringing phone was strangely comforting. It reminded me that life continues, with or without your permission. People at the office didn't ask much. Maybe they knew. Maybe they didn't. But I wasn't interested in the kind of sympathy that came in awkward glances or half-hearted invitations to happy hour. I was fine with silence. It felt more honest. Camille became more present in my life. Gradually. Naturally. She had this way of showing up exactly when I didn't realize I needed someone. Like the Saturday I was trying to fix the broken door handle on the back screen door and ended up cursing under my breath with a wrench in one hand and the other bleeding slightly from where the screwdriver slipped. She called that morning. I'm bored, she said. I'm coming over. You're just going to show up? Yeah, she replied. With sandwiches and peroxide, because I know you're too damn stubborn to clean that cut properly. And she did. Roast beef on rye, 2 beers, and a first aid kit she kept in her glove box because, as she put it, the world is full of clumsy men. We didn't talk about Denise. Not anymore. The last time her name came up, I told Camille I didn't want to give her more air. Camille just nodded, like she understood something deeper than I'd said aloud. One afternoon, maybe late July, we went to Como Zoo. Neither of us had been in years. We watched the giraffes for a while, then sat on a shaded bench eating melting ice cream. You think you'll ever get married again? She asked out of nowhere. I didn't answer right away. I don't know, I said eventually. I think I'm still unlearning the last one. She chuckled softly. Fair. She didn't say if she would. That was Camille, never offering more than was needed. We started spending more evenings together. She'd come over with her dog, Murphy, a wiry terrier with too much energy, and we'd sit in the backyard while the dogs ran around like fools. It wasn't romantic. Not at first. It was comfortable. Safe. We were two people orbiting the same emptiness, trying not to fall back into it. But there were moments, quiet, sudden moments, that made me wonder. Like the time she caught me watching her laugh at a video on her phone. Just an ordinary laugh, but full, unguarded. When she noticed me looking, she tilted her head and said, What? Nothing, I said. But something had shifted. We both felt it. Still, we didn't cross that line. Not yet. In early August, Denise texted again. Can I drop off a few things? I found some boxes in storage that belong to you. I stared at the message for a while. then replied, "Leave them on the porch." "I'd rather hand them to you," she said. I agreed. Against my better judgment, maybe. But part of me was curious. Not hopeful, just curious. She arrived that evening. She looked different. Lighter, in a way I couldn't define. But there was a tightness around her eyes, too. She was holding something back. She always did. The boxes were small, books mostly, some old letters, a few things I thought were lost. She stood awkwardly by the door while I opened one, more out of politeness than actual interest. Then she said, "Do you hate me?" I looked up. Her voice hadn't cracked, but it was close. "No," I said after a pause. "I don't. But you don't love me anymore." I let the silence answer for me. "I thought he was a way out," she whispered. "I didn't realize I was just walking into another trap." "You had a choice," I replied. "Not cruel, just honest." She nodded. "I know." We stood there a moment longer. Then she turned and walked down the steps. She didn't look back. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with Booker curled at my feet, the ceiling fan spinning shadows around the room. My mind wasn't on Denise, not entirely. It was on everything. The years lost, the quiet sacrifices, the pieces of myself I'd traded for peace. Grief is strange. It doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in fragments. In the taste of a familiar dish. In the shape of a coat hanging by the door. In the sound of someone's keys. It sneaks up when you least expect it, and it never truly leaves. But something else had crept in too. Something gentler. I wasn't ready to call it healing, but maybe it was the beginning of peace. Camille came over the next morning. She brought bagels and coffee. We sat on the porch, watching the sun climb up over the rooftops, and didn't say much. Eventually, I said, "She came by last night." Camille nodded, not surprised. She asked if I hated her. And, she asked. I told her no. "That's good," she said. "You don't need hate hanging around. It gets in your food." I laughed. It felt real. We didn't touch. We didn't make any declarations. But something in the air felt settled. Like we both knew a door had closed, and neither of us was going to knock on it again. By the end of August, the air started to shift. Minnesota summers don't linger, they turn on a dime. One day it's 88 and sticky, the next it's 65 and you're reaching for a hoodie. The trees hadn't started changing yet, but you could feel it coming. That soft warning that everything green would soon be gold, then red, then gone. I found myself standing in front of the closet one evening, staring at a jacket of Denise's I'd never moved. It still hung there like a ghost. I reached for it, then stopped. I wasn't ready yet, but I would be. Soon. September came quickly, and with it, a strange clarity. Fall always had that effect on me. Something about the air being crisp enough to bite, the skies clearer, the daylight softer. You start to see things for what they are, stripped of the summer gloss. I spent more time outside, walking Booker through the quiet neighborhoods around Como Park, noticing every detail like it had always been there, but I'd only just started paying attention. Camille and I grew closer, not in a rushed or dramatic way, but with a calm certainty. We were still two people figuring ourselves out, but now there was an unspoken understanding that we were doing it together. It felt solid, not flashy, just real. One Saturday afternoon, while we were painting the guest bedroom together, her idea, "It looks like a dentist office in here." Camille mentioned a job posting she'd seen at her office. "They're looking for a training consultant to run employee workshops. You'd be good at it," she said, rolling paint onto the wall. "I'm not really a teacher." "No, but you're a talker. And you don't sugarcoat. People remember that." I laughed. "Is that a compliment?" "It's both," she smirked. I applied on a whim the next week. Not because I hated my job, but because something inside me was starting to shift. I didn't want to be surrounded by the pieces of the life I'd had with Denise anymore. I wanted to move towards something new, not out of spite, but out of necessity. And then, life, in its typical timing, handed me a strange gift. One afternoon, I was heading into Kowalski's, the grocery store near Grand, when I spotted someone familiar near the self-checkout lane. Denise. She was alone, wearing a dark coat and pushing a cart with just a few things: eggs, wine, cereal. Her hair was tied back, and she looked different. Not worse, just tired in a way I recognized. She didn't see me, and I ducked behind a shelf like a coward, unsure why I was even hiding. But then I saw someone else. Calvin. He wasn't with her. He was at another register, near the front. Dressed in a cheap-looking button-down, eyes sunken. He was arguing with the cashier about a declined card. His voice was low but urgent, and I caught enough of it to realize he was trying to buy smokes and couldn't cover the cost. He looked finished, like someone who'd bet big and lost everything. I didn't linger. I walked past them both and out the door without being seen, heart thumping with something I didn't yet understand. The next few weeks, things began falling into place. I got the job Camille recommended, consulting for a mid-sized company in Eden Prairie. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me purpose. I led workshops on leadership, conflict resolution, communication, all the things I'd SK'd at during my marriage, now repackaged as wisdom. Funny how that works. Camille and I started dating officially. We didn't call it that, Not right away, but it was clear to everyone around us. Even Booker knew. He stopped growling when she reached for the leash. And then one day in November, the idea hit me. Not like a lightning bolt, more like a slow turn of a key in a lock I'd forgotten was there. I didn't want revenge in the classic sense. I didn't want Denise to suffer. I didn't want Calvin to crash and burn. What I wanted was for them to see who I'd become. So I planned something subtle. Nothing loud. Just satisfying. Every year, Regent's Hospital held a fundraising gala. Big event. Public. Formal. Denise was always involved. She helped organize it. I knew she'd be there. I also knew Camille had ties to the hospital from a previous consulting contract. She was invited. Plus one. I rented a suit. Got a haircut. Clean shave. New cologne. I didn't want to look like the man who'd been left. I wanted to look like the man who got up afterward. Camille looked incredible. Dark green dress. Simple jewelry. Hair pinned up. She didn't ask questions. She knew enough of the plan to play along. We arrived fashionably late. People noticed. Some stared. Camille worked the room effortlessly, polished, warm, clever. I made polite conversation, shook hands, avoided too many glances toward the stage where Denise was seated. But eventually, our paths crossed. She spotted me near the bar. Her eyes widened slightly, just enough. She wasn't expecting me. She certainly wasn't expecting this version of me. She approached. Slowly. "Russ," she said. I turned, calm, like I'd just remembered an old friend. "Denise." She looked me over, then at Camille, who stood beside me with a gentle, knowing smile. "You look different." "New job," I said simply. "New routine. Cleaner eating. It helps." She nodded, eyes flicking again to Camille. "I see you've moved on." "Eventually," I said. "Takes time, but you get there." Camille extended a hand. "Hi. I've heard so much." Denise hesitated, then shook it. We didn't say much else. She was called back to her table by one of the event organizers. As she turned, I caught her looking back over her shoulder. That was it. No argument. No apology. No grand moment. But I could see it in her face, the awareness. The realization that what she discarded had not only survived, but thrived. And that was enough. We stayed at the gala for another hour. Then we left. Stopped for ice cream on the way home. Sat in the car with the windows cracked, laughing at nothing in particular. And as we drove back, Camille reached over and rested her hand on mine. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Better than okay. Because it wasn't just revenge. It wasn't just proving something. It was freedom. From bitterness. From regret. From the version of myself I'd left behind at that restaurant table months ago. And as the city lights passed by us in silence, I realized something. Closure doesn't always come with answers or apologies. Sometimes it just looks like walking away with your head high and your heart intact.